we believe is a house of hope and a house of memory. In this place, we participate to make it a beloved community. This is our hour of celebration, our hour of honoring the goodness in our lives within each and all of us. This is a great and momentous time together, a ready opportunity to express our fondest and most important aspirations as we seek that which is of worth in our lives. We celebrate today what is possible and probable. And we all know and we all want to know the potential that resides among us individually and as a community. We want to know our likelihood, our aspirations of what we can accomplish. We celebrate that common generative spirit which is within and among us. We honor that innate and inmost calling, which is encoded sort of like the inside of an acorn, which is the promise of a magnificent tree in the future. And today we look for that inmost important part of who we are. And just to think that that is a possibility, that this little seed contains the most grand plans that we have for 100 years into the future of this congregation. We rejoice that that place exists, and that place is here, a place which allows for honor, for praise, and for hope. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your life's journey, you're welcome to join us today.
This is a story from West Africa about a spider called Anastasi. And all the time I've been practicing it, I've been calling him Anastasi. So pardon me if I slip, because Anastasi is not a very bright spider. And also, I'm going to ask the kids to take on roles here. One of them is Anastasi the spider, and the other one is his daughter. Who wants to be the spider? Who wants to be the daughter? Okay, okay. And you need to hold these up like backwards, okay, so people can see. And when I'm using Anastasi's words, you can kind of bounce it around so it looks like he's talking, or his daughter's words, okay? This is called Anastasi and the Pot of Wisdom. Anastasi the spider loves to spin a tale. He can regale you for hours with stories full of wonder, stories full of fun, and stories full of facts, too, because he's so nosy. Anastasi knows almost everything about almost everybody. Almost. But Anastasi wants to know everything. So one day, he goes to the house of the sun god. Oh, mighty sun god, you see everything and everyone. Won't you share your great wisdom with me? I'll use it wisely to spin tales of wonder and fun for everyone. The sun god says, Anastasi, I will put all the wisdom the world has here in this clay pot. You must share this wisdom with everyone. Anastasi promises to do so. Anastasi takes the pot home. He looks deep into the clay pot, and sure enough, he sees sights he has never seen before. He hears sounds he didn't know existed. This is too good to give away, he says. I will keep this great wisdom for myself. I must hide it, Anastasi says. And he looks around for a good hiding place. Your part's coming. Anastasi decides to climb to the top of the tallest tree. There he will tie the clay pot up and up high in leafy branches and will hide it. He starts climbing the tree, holding the pot in front of him. The climbing's hard. Have you ever climbed a tree while holding a pot? No. Anansi wishes he had 9 legs. How many legs do spiders have? 8? Very good. But he wishes he had 9. He wants one more. Yep. His youngest daughter, and you can tell it's his daughter because of the long curly hair. His youngest daughter is outside and sees what a hard time Anansi is having. Father, it would be easier if you tied the pot to your back. Then all your legs would be free for climbing. Do you think Anansi is happy to get good advice from his daughter? Well, think again. She's right. It would be easier. Why is it some young ones think of this when I, who possess all the wisdom of the world, did not? Anansi gets so angry, he throws the pot to the ground. All of the wisdom of the world comes flowing out of the pot. Some falls here, some falls there. No one gets all of the wisdom, but everyone gets some of the wisdom. This is why even today, wisdom is everywhere. If you listen to the stories spun from storytellers all around the world, you'll hear that wisdom. And now it's time for our read class.
Concern that I personally am having, and some of you know that my partner Bob has been having a rough couple of weeks, mostly from some of the after effects of a cancer that he had some years ago, and those of you who've been there know that those things come back in various forms, and so he's been having some rough times. Some of you have been very gracious to bring over food, since I don't know how to do that part of our life, and I really appreciate it. But if you would keep him in your thoughts and prayers for good wishes, I would greatly appreciate that. It is a good and wholesome thing to gather like this, to come to this place with these people, to participate in this event, which is the sharing of our lives together. And we give thanks for the giving and the receiving of the stories of our lives. We fondly remember all those things which were spoken, and we imagine that which was not spoken, that which was left unsaid, still kept within heavy hearts, too precious even to be named. Let us receive all of these into our minds and our hearts and our lives. And let us take this very special moment to enter gently and lovingly into the spirit of prayer and meditation and thanksgiving. May we embrace this precious moment, bringing ourselves wholly into this eternal now. We put away our daily obstacles, the headaches and the irritations. We try to put away our worries and doubts, and we carefully open ourselves to the pulse of life and the rhythms of life. We know of our fears and our hopes about health and illness, about jobs, about family, about success and failure. And for a moment, we set them aside. At times like these, we acknowledge our deepest selves, our innermost longings and rewards, and we know that we need one another and that we keep faith in one another. And as we keep faith in the world, we open ourselves up to the depths, the spirit of life within, surging, flowing, guiding, and sustaining, so that the strength and the hope we need comes together with the compassion the world needs, so that we may shine as a beacon to all places. We recognize and honor the powerful energy present even now within and among us, an energy which comes from the congregation, mighty and gentle, creative and transforming. And as we remember the broken places in the world, those places calling out to us to be mended, we recall the very meaning of this place, that there is love in the world, and love can transform us and heal us constantly, now and forever, world without end. Yes, yes, and always we say yes. Three years ago, I was preparing to move from Seattle to Southern California, and I had a lot of decisions to make. One of the biggest ones was to decide what I was going to bring with me. Things that I absolutely needed to have in my new life in Southern California. Among all of the stuff, and believe me when I say there was a lot of stuff, what would I need to undertake a new life? That not only in a new location, but the life of a new kind of minister. That is the life of an interim minister. So I began rummaging through everything that I had, and I started discarding this and then clinging to that, predicting that this item will be essential to me someday. I just know. And the other one, well, maybe, and maybe it's optional whether I should take it or not. And at first I thought I was only going to be down here in this part of the world for a year, so I didn't really have to think in eternity terms. Maybe I could have a chance to come back and get some of this stuff that I was leaving. And so just as I believed throughout my whole life that I need to try to clean up my life, to straighten up my life, to throw away the clutter that is in my life, and to just keep what is really important to me. And so I ended up bringing a ton of stuff. It was just amazing how much stuff. I mean, it was like $8,000 to have all this stuff moved down from Seattle to Escondido. And it was this huge van, and they were pushing things into it at the very last minute, trying to get the door closed on all of this stuff that I had. So, of course, I needed every single thing in there, and it was very important to bring all that stuff down. Well, right about this time, there was an article in Consumers Reports, and they asked around 1,000 people. They did a survey, and they said, what is it that you really need? What do you really need in your life? So before I'll tell you the answers here, what do you think you really need in your life? If you're going to go off to another planet or something, and you could take things, what would you really take? What would you really need to take? So out of all the things listed, what do you think the number one thing people said they really need? Family photographs, okay? All right? Anything else? Money. Yes, money, yes. And I think mostly they were talking about things. You know, like, what things do you need? And the photographs are a thing, and they are also something more than a thing. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But the number one thing that these 1,000 Americans said they needed was a microwave oven. And when you think about it, it is pretty important, face it. I don't really know how as they were coming across, got by without a microwave. I really don't. 26% said that's the number one thing they need. Number two was the computer, 19%. Number three, and this is surprising, it was so low on the list, was a cell phone. Cable TV was in at 14%. Broadband internet was at 10%. A smartphone, like an iPhone, was at 7%. ATM, can't get by without an ATM, 5%. Digital camera, GPS, which is now on the cell phone. So that's what Americans think about things and about what is really important. So I've thought a whole lot about that. And as I was moving down here, and then last year I moved again from Escondido up to Goleta. And once I had to decide what was going to be taken. And to complicate it, it was at that time we decided to get rid of the house in Seattle. So we had to go back to Seattle and decide what we had, of the stuff we had left there, what we were going to bring down here, and what we were going to discard and throw away. And it was one of the hardest times in my life to go through that decision making. So I've been doing this thing of trying to hang on the thing that was most important to me in my life. And, you know, everybody has their own thing. I was going through this box that said memories on it. And be careful about a box that says memories. And I came with this little envelope that had Jessica's first haircut lock in there. And I said, oh, I can throw that away. Right, yeah. And on and on. And you certainly can come up with your own stories. And Ellen talked to us a lot about this a couple of weeks ago, and even Lisa last week. But there's another way that I'm thinking about this, and that is about the IRS and the draconian effect that it has on my life. Like many of you, I experienced a day of reckoning a couple of weeks ago on April 15th, and that's always that I complete my IRS forms, the April 15th, not before the 15th. And of course, you can't be after the 15th, but the 15th, about 11:59 p.m., I'm usually done. For the past several years, I've been doing it online using TurboTax. And so theoretically, I can actually wait till 11:59 p.m. on the 15th to send it in, and it wings its way to IRS wherever they are. They're everywhere, actually, and through the clouds. But in the old days, I always would have to go down to the post office on the 15th. And luckily, they would have this special place where they would postmark your thing to prove that you were sending it in before the end of the day. And these people were angrily in line, making sure that their big fat envelope IRS was stamped, ensuring that they wouldn't go to jail. The actual send-off of that form, though, and it's still this way even with TurboTax, is that I have to go through all of this stuff to figure out how much tax I owe. So that means as a kind of self-employed person, I have to go through all the receipts, my driving expenses, anything I do having with my job, and all of the W-2 forms and this and that thing and all these different things that I have to go through. And it's like this pile of paper of things that I have to choose among in order to prove to the IRS that I'm not guilty. So I have to, first of all, organize everything into piles, and I'm not a good organizer. And I keep getting sidetracked when I start finding little snippets of paper, which are actually snippets of memories of something that happened during this last year. And so I have to stop the process and think about, for a moment, that moment which is represented by the note, and end up losing an hour, and the clock keeps ticking. And also impeding my process is the minute-by-minute to either keep this piece or to throw it away. What is really important in all of this pile of yesterdays, the pile of yesterdays, and what should I hang on to and what should I cast away? And that brings us to the title of the sermon, The Baby and the Bathwater, which comes from the old saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I've always been very disturbed by that image. The picture of it in my mind is horrific, and I wonder, is it even possible to accidentally throw the baby out when you're getting in a bath? Is that even possible? And whoever came up with such an amazingly horrific image is that? And so I began to think, well, why do we have that phrase? What are we talking about with that phrase? And I assume that, of course, it's a symbolism or it's a metaphor of some kind. So which of these things is the baby and which is the junk? And you know, it's extremely important to be clear about what to throw out and what to keep, especially if there's a possibility that the baby is going to go down the drain in some way. This kind of thing has always been a religious question for me, of course. What is of value in my life, and what is the stuff I really need to get rid of? And that's what we do each week in these worship services. That is, we worship the origin of that word. So I want to look a little closer into the saying about the baby in the bathwater. For instance, I have a question. Why are we giving the baby a bath in the first place? If the baby is so important, why do we want to alter it and make it something different? Well, of course, everybody knows the answer to that. We want to get rid of the dirt and the stink and the germs in order to make the baby healthy and happy and clean, because cleanliness, yes. The whole idea that the bath comes from our concern for the baby's welfare, physical, psychological, and of course spiritual welfare. And the next question I have is determining the identity of the baby. Parents would say that the baby is whatever is the most important thing in the world. The apple of my eye, the reason for living, the thing without which my life has no meaning. And of course, we know that a baby is not a thing, for things do not give meaning to a person's life. The baby is not composed of material things like houses and cars and stereos and iPhones and photographs and books and old love letters and old bank records and receipts that we keep for tax purposes. The baby may be made of immaterial things such as memories, and good and bad ones, abstract ideas and philosophies, hopes and dreams, something about a satisfied mind, a sense of accomplishment or fulfillment, and a sense of worth. And what about the bath water? What is in that? What is that debris that we want to rinse off the baby to get rid of it? For me, it could be something like addictions, regrets, angers, depression, unforgiveness, judgmentalism. The bathwater contains everything that gets in the way of the baby's health and welfare. On a very personal note, I did this baby bath water exercise when I left the religion of my upbringing. But it was 15 years later that I realized that I had, in fact, thrown the baby out with the bath water. Something's missing, I said, even as I was entering the new world of Unitarian Universalism, which is a long way away from the world of Pentecostalism and good old heart-blessing music from the past. And at first, in fact, I thought it was the music that I was missing. That energetic, spirit-filled, heartfelt gospel music that I grew up with, which I love and I still love today. And music was part of my baby that I had. Maybe it was the soul of the baby that I had. The baby I threw out was grounded sense of divinity, let's say, perhaps one, what I would come to name as God, and in that case, maybe God is, God's soul is music for me. And I was having trouble kind of getting through all of that stuff. So Mary Oliver comes again, always, to my rescue, and she says, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, and to hold it against your bones as if your own life depends on it. Talk about the definition of the baby. To hold it against your bones, knowing that your life depends upon it. And then she says, and when the time comes to let it go, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to let it go. But it's that line that jumps out that says, knowing that your own life depends upon it, that's the baby, and that's the thing you can't do without. And that's the thing that would be so hard when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. And I think that's the real meaning of that last line. So for me, this is a religious issue on many levels. And the reading of so many of the great spiritual Bibles and the spiritual literature from the great religions speak about this. In particular, Christianity and Buddhism have much to say about what they call the possessions that we have, the things that we have and that we accumulate. And remember the Sermon on the Mount phrase, for what use is it for someone to gain the whole world and to lose the soul? Jesus often spoke about that In fact, the central idea of his prophetic message to the world, I think, might be said that the true value of one's life is that which you hold against, which your whole life depends on. The Buddha also said much about this, the Four Noble Truths that sum up the Buddha's message and announce that life is inseparably tied to what he called dukkha. And this is a Pali word which is often translated as suffering, but means something deeper than pain and misery when we think of suffering. It refers to a basic unsatisfactoriness running through our lives, the lives of all but the enlightened. Sometimes this unsatisfactoriness erupts into the open as sorrow and grief and disappointment and despair. But usually it hovers at the edge of our awareness as a vague, unlocalized sense that things are never just right, never fully adequate to the expectations of what they should be. And so the problem arises how to break the shackles of desire. And the Buddha does not offer as a remedy for that the method of repression, of putting that down, the attempt to drive desire away with a mind full of fear and loathing. This approach doesn't resolve the problem, but only pushes it to below the surface. The tool that the Buddha holds out is to free the mind by understanding. Real renunciation is not a matter of compelling ourselves to give up things still inwardly cherished, but of changing our perspective on them so that they no longer bind us in their attraction. And when we understand the nature of desire, when we investigate it closely with a keen attention, desire itself falls away without a need for instruction. And the whole phenomenon of desire, with its cycle of wanting and gratification, hangs on to our way of seeing things. We cannot ordinarily look at the surface of things and scan them in terms of our immediate interests. Only rarely do we get around to digging into the roots of our involvement, our desire, our way of wanting, and always wanting. I think this discussion about wanting and about possessions and about babies and bathwater and choosing and hanging on to and letting go is extremely relevant to us right here at Live Oak right now. As we travel through this time of transition, we are confronted by many possible changes in our so-called attachments, and especially how and why we have those attachments. And I've heard the phrase more than once, we've always done it that way. And we are sometimes attached to that idea. And that's just one of the ideas. We can say that to follow the Buddhist idea of understanding as a way of confronting these things, we've gathered together in our conversation salons, which are actually a way of understanding ourselves and who we are, and why we are attracted to this and not to that, and why we hold a value this and not that, and why we bring something to our bones as if our life depends on it. People are invited at the salons to speak their minds about many things, including what they have identified as the baby. What is the baby among us now? As we're washing the baby in this congregational transition time, in a way, that's what we're finding out what the essential truth is, what the soul is of Live Oak. And as we are washing away everything that gets in the way of that soul's happiness and health and welfare, we come to this central core, this soul, something like the soul that was in that acorn that has the promise of this amazing tree 100 years from now. So we are identifying the baby as we work together here. We are identifying the bathwater as we work together here. We should continue to ask these questions, for it is central as we move along in our collective journey. You know, we love the metaphor of the journey. We're on a journey together. And if you've ever taken let's say a backpacking trip where you know you're going to be out in the woods, in the mountains for 4 or 5 days, exactly what you take on that trip. It's a very specific plan that you must make. And what's the most important thing that you must take on that trip? And how do you gather those things together? And if you're backpacking, and I remember the last time I did that up at the whole forest in the Olympic Peninsula in the state of Washington, that water was the big issue. They just put out all this information that all the water had these bacteria, that you should not drink the water no matter what. And here it is. The one day it rained 11 inches in one day in the whole forest in Washington State. But you can't drink the water. Well, the problem with carrying water is it's really heavy. And as we go on our trip, what is it that we're carrying that's really heavy, even if it might be the very thing we can't do without? It's an interesting little way of looking at the question. That in fact, that which we cannot live without is the heaviest thing we own. And that's why we take it on the trip. If we were going on a desert island, what 3 things do you take with you? Number 1, the microwave. And then you can make your own lists down the line with that. And as we are together on this collective trip to this new land, together, Live Oak, Universalist congregation, what are we going to take on the trip, and what are we going to leave behind, and what is so important that our life depends on it? May we always answer these questions with truth and honesty and goodness. May you be blessed with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May you be blessed with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May you be blessed with tears to shed for those who suffer with pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may you be blessed with just enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in the world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Amen.